the library. We'd also like to welcome Dale Monette. He's here again to share with us his photos of his wildlife.
I'm like a bad penny.
So he doesn't need more of an explanation. Without further ado.
I want to thank Margaret and Liz and Debbie for putting up with me again. The first book, if any of you got the first book about quabbin, it's all specifically quabbin. Well, I expanded my range on this one, and I went all over the place. So, okay, I found this on the internet one day, and I thought, I'd go into the forest. I've lost my mind a long time ago in the forest. My folks used to drop me off in the forest and come pick me up in 2 or 3 hours, and so I lost my mind then. And a lot of people ask me how I get the pictures and how I do what I do, and that says it all right there. It's patience. If anybody does any wildlife photography, you'll know that you can never predict on what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And the thing that keeps me going back is because I know what is there. Because sometimes I've seen it, sometimes I've done research on where these animals are, and so I'm always on the lookout. And this is kind of divided into 3 sections, and the first one is voyagers. And I looked it up in the library, the dictionary. Someone who goes on a long trip, a traveler to a distant land, like this guy right here. This is a great gray owl, and live. And there are more of them, more or less up here, up into Alaska and northwestern Canada. They're the largest owl in the continent, and I've only seen 2 in my lifetime. And one was when I was at school at UMass in the early 80s. There was one that appeared up there, and it hung around for a month. And then a couple years ago, there was one up in Newport, New Hampshire, and it started hanging around in an airport, and it was there for 6 weeks. And with the internet and everything today, the word got out. And within a couple weeks of it being up there, I mean, it was just mobbed. I went up 6 times to see it. 4 out of the 6 times it was there. And I took a lot of pictures, and people came from all over the place. And I stopped going because there was just so many people. And one day I was up there, and there was a guy standing beside me taking pictures, and he had flown up to Logan from Kentucky the day before, and he rented a car and he drove all the way up to New Hampshire. So people come from all over the place to see things like this. They're the biggest owl in the North American continent. The adults are almost 3 feet high, the wingspan of 5 feet. They're big and fluffy. With all of that, you look at them and you think they must weigh about 15 pounds, but they don't. The males weigh 2.5 pounds and the females weigh 3.5 pounds, like in all owls and birds of prey. And in 2004 and 2005, there was an eruption year. Now, an eruption year is when there's lack of food up north and birds seem to move. And usually they're young birds that can't make it through the winter. So they head south until they find food, and when they find a place, they hang around. And there were over 5,000 great gray owls in Minnesota then. And they, like all owls, they're very visual, and they hunt during the day. And their hearing is fantastic. This bird was sitting in a tree, and he jumped out of the tree, and he was coming right towards me. And he landed probably 25, 30 feet in front of me. And owls have these big, they call them facial discs, and it helps them aim towards noises. And an ear on an owl is lower on one side and higher on the other. And it's designed so that also helps them zoom in on noises. And I've read that these guys can go down 3 feet in, really powder snow. If they hear something, they'll go right under the surface. And once they find something, a lot of them will hunt from the ground. And this guy was bouncing around. He had a vole or a mouse or something. And I watched him, and he didn't come up with anything, and he went right back to the spot that he was in the tree. And then later on in the afternoon, he was sitting on this pole, and I walked up with I use a 500 millimeter lens a lot. That's why I'll never crowd an animal. I'm not one of these guys that I have to get the shot. If I see an animal that's getting upset because I'm there, I'll back off or I'll leave. But with a 500 millimeter lens, you can get a lot closer to them and visually. And this is how they blend right in. And another owl. We had an eruption year last winter. This is a cousin. This is a barred owl. And there were barred owls all over the place in the Connecticut River. And I spent a lot of time out there, and I took maybe 4,000 pictures of barred owls. But you got to do that if you want to come up with some sharp pictures. You just, shooting is free with digital. You can just, and I have a motor drive with a camera that'll go for 9 frames a second. So it doesn't take long to, boogie up the numbers of frames. But this guy was hunting in a snowstorm. Their owls have it. I found that they were hunting from the same locations. Maybe the hunting was good there. This was a pile of hay in a field, and almost every time I went by there, this owl was sitting there. Their eyes aren't yellow. They're brownish gray, as you can see. And they're the owls that go, "Who cooks for you?" They're the most common owl in Massachusetts. And they're a little bit smaller than a snowy owl. And I'd like to say that I climbed halfway up a mountain, and I went through 2 blizzards to take this picture. I froze my feet, but I didn't. I rolled the window down, I put the lens on the glass, and I took the picture from the warmth of my car. And I call them the flying mouse traps. And seeing how it's Halloween, I had to put some snowy owls in here. Here again, these come down in eruption years. I retired from the Quabbin in 2014, and that year there were 10 or 15 of them up in Salisbury State Park in Plum Island, and they were everywhere. I spent a lot of time up there. But when I was putting this book together, I didn't quite have any pictures that I thought I wanted to put in the book. So I was telling a friend of mine about snowy owls, and it was in March. And about a week after that conversation, she sent me a picture of an owl similar to this. And she said, "I found this on the coast of Rhode Island." So I said, "I'm there." So I drove 2 hours and 20 minutes down there one Sunday morning. I got down there, and it was a long island similar to Plum Island. And I'm driving out there, and I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I ever going to find a snowy owl in all of this expanse territory? So I could see the visitor center in the distance. So I drove up the hill to the visitor center, and I looked up on the roof, and it was like, "Where have you been, Dale?"
Where in Rhode Island was that?
It was in Satchewest National Wildlife Refuge. It's east of Newport. It's a beautiful place. The only time I've ever been there, but I want to go back. But I don't like crowds in the spring. There'll probably be people all over the place down there, getting their boats ready and just traffic, and so. But I watched this owl for 4 or 5 hours, and 3 times he flew. and landed in a field. And that's when he was flying away from the field. He's the owl on the cover of my book here. That's when I took that picture. But snowy owls, they're 24 inches high. They're a little bit smaller than the great grays. And the males are 3.5 pounds, and the females weigh 4.5 pounds. And snowy owls, this is where they nest. Way up in northern Alaska, up northern Canada, and this is where they'll turn up in the winter. A friend of mine is writing a book on snowy owls, and he spent the summer way up here in Barrow, Alaska, taking pictures. He set up a blind, and he knows a owl researcher up there, and he set him up on a nest. So he watched the chicks hatch, and then he was there 5 or 6 weeks until they had left the nest and they were all hopping around on the tundra. And they're just beautiful owls. These are just some pictures. They had, out back, they had solar panels. And this was about noon. And the owl flew out and it landed right here on this cement thing. And this is the beginning of the solar panels. And there was a woman standing beside me, and there was about 4 or 5 of us there, and the woman said, "Oh no," she says, "see where he's sitting?" She says, "You might as well go home, because he's going to go into the solar panels and he's going to be there until it's dark." And she no sooner said the words than off it went, right under the solar panels. And I went home. The thing that amazes me about all the owls I see is their talons. Their talons are just, I wouldn't want to be a mouse or a vole or something and get them in the back of the head. And they do show up around here. I took this a couple years ago in Northampton, on what they call honey pot, and down in the honey pot. This was up in Hampton State Park in New Hampshire, sitting on this birdhouse. I was driving along and I looked out and here's this snowy owl sitting on the top of this house.
You're an owl magnet.
Yeah, and well, this was a mile down the road from my house in New Salem a couple years ago.
Wow.
This is a great horned owl. This is a Nova Scotia owl. This is up on Cape Breton Island. I was in a pond looking for moose, and this guy came flying right by me one day. And these owls will take over a great blue heron's nest. They nest, they lay their eggs at the end of January, the 1st of February. And these chicks they were probably 10 or 12 weeks old.
So they have to pay.
There are a lot of them around, but they're hard to see. They're very nocturnal. And this is a little screech owl. This was in a cemetery up in Nashua. And my friend that I just mentioned doing the snowy owl research, he knew of this owl, so he took me up there. And the owl was at dusk. It doesn't look it by all the light in this camera, but it's what my camera will do if I push it. And this is my friend's wife holding the 2 owls. They go around with their owls and they do programs. And the gray screech owl on the right, and these gray screech owls, they like to hang out in the brush and stuff. And the red seems to like to hang around in the big trees, in the wood trees, where the gray ones are all on the edges of fields and forests and stuff. Another visitor to Massachusetts, these are tundra swans. They call them whistling swans. They're very rare in Massachusetts. And these 2 were visiting, and they had some friends with them. There was 19 of them. This is in the Connecticut River. This is a sandhill crane. And up until 1974, I believe it was 74, they had only been seen occasionally in Massachusetts. And I'm getting mixed up. This was in the 80s. They were found nesting out in Cummington, out in the Berkshires. There was a pair, and there's 3 pairs now that are nesting in Massachusetts. Same thing last year. I got a call, hey, there's 10 sandhill cranes up in Royalston, in the Royalston Eagle Preserve. There's 10 in this picture. And I went up and I took these pictures, and while I was there, these guys took off and left. This is a pipit. This is a bird up in the Arctic that comes through Massachusetts, and you can see that they blend right in with the plumage. This was in the fall. This one was hidden south. These are geese that also visit Quabbin. They don't nest out here, but they're visitors, so they go in the visitor box. This is one good turn, and this is another. These are at the Quabbin Reservoir, and they're common terns. And for some reason, pelagic birds show up at the Quabbin once in a while. With all the winds we've had in the last month, they've had surf scoters out there. They've had black scoters. I found an eider duck on Lake Mattawa one afternoon. So they do show up. And this was in the middle of the summer. I do loon surveys out there with them, and we came around the corner one day, and these two terns were sitting right on this rock. And while we're talking about birds, oceanic birds, this is eider ducks. Harlequin ducks. And these are also birds of the Arctic Circle, but they do come down, and they're here now. I saw pictures of them. You can see them along the coast of Massachusetts, up along Rockport, Newburyport, up and through there. I took these off of the Marginal Way up in Ogunquit, Maine. And these birds, they feed right under the waves. They'll get right under the crashing waves because the waves turn up all kinds of food that they're after. So while we're in the ocean, this is something that hardly anybody ever sees. And I was lucky to be on a whale watch. There's only 400 of these whales left in the world. This is a right whale. And this is the whale that all the whalers back in the 1800s were killing. They said they named it the right whale because it was the right whale to kill because of the blubber and all the oil and everything. We were on a whale watch out of Gloucester this spring, and the woman that was doing the narrating, she got all excited and she said, we got something exciting. We're going to have to leave these whales and hold on for 10 minutes. We've got something really exciting that you people are going to want to see. So the boat went like heck for 20 minutes, 10, 20 minutes, and then they came upon this thing, and it was just swimming along, and every now and then it would blow, and then down it would go.
I wonder how old it is.
Yeah, oh, imagine, yeah. So that was really cool. So I had to put that in the air so you people could at least see pictures of it. Great egrets, these are relatives of the great blue herons. They were hunted to extinction in the 1800s in Massachusetts for their feathers in ladies' hats. In 1954, there was a pair of them. They were discovered on the North Shore. And they nest from northern Massachusetts all the way south to the Cape. And after the nesting ends and the chicks all leave the nest, then these birds fly inland. And where I took the tundra swans, pictures of the tundra swans, there's something about it that attracts these guys. And for the last 2 or 3 years, there's been 10 or 11 of them out there, and they're out there from mid-August until the end of September. And they just seem to have no fear of people with cameras. I took this picture I was up there one foggy morning, and I was ready to leave, but I could hear them. I knew they were out there, and the fog started to lift, and they would come flying in, and they just appear out of the fog, and they'd land right in front of me. So I spent a lot of time taking pictures of these guys coming out of the fog. Their skin is black, and their legs are black also. And sometimes if the wind blows, you can see the black skin underneath their feathers. I almost said fur. But they're a lot of fun to watch. They're a little bit smaller than great blue herons. This is one that came out of the fog. And there are egrets around here that are smaller than this, but they have yellow feet. And those are called cattle egrets, because they like to hang around with cows. If you see them in the field, sometimes a lot of cows, they'll be, following after the cows. And here you can see one who's got away with a fish. But you can see the difference in size between the egrets and the great blue herons. And I saw this one day, looking at the pond. All I could think of was it was incredible how a whole world can rise from what seems nothing at all by this woman. And this is one of my favorite ponds. There's 1, 2, 3 beaver ponds in there. And there's another one off to the right, and there's another one off to the left. And I've been following these guys. I've been so close to some of these that they think I'm one of the clan, I guess, because they just don't even pay attention to me. I've had them come out of the water and go right by me, and I just stand there. I set up, like right where I am now. I'll set up with my 500mm lens, and I just take pictures of whatever goes by. And this is what these guys do. They're what they call keystone species, which means they set up and they'll turn this pond into a hole, like the picture just said. There's a lot of animals that depend on beavers. If the beavers leave, the water goes down. A lot of those animals that we'll see now, they don't stay around, and a whole new biodiversity sets in. They weigh between 35 and 50 pounds. They're the second largest rodent in North America. They're 2 to 3 feet in length, and their tail can be as much as 18 feet long, 18 inches long. They've got shiny hairs that cover their underneath. They've got 2 layers of fur, and they also have, they secrete a liquid called castoreum, and they keep their feathers, they keep their fur all covered with this castoreum, and it waterproofs them.
That tail is just like a paddle.
Yeah, yeah. This cracks me up. Beavers have 77,000 hairs per square inch. I thought that was something. I couldn't imagine how they found that out until I found out otters have 165,000 hairs per square inch. I wouldn't want to have that job. But anyways, these guys love me, what can I say? This guy, I was one morning, and they were plugging up their dam, and this guy came in and stuffed something in the dam, and he got a whiff of me, and he stood right up and he looked, and I was from here to that coat hanger, and he just kind of looked at me and dropped down and went about his way. This guy pulled up in front of me one day, and he had this stick, and he started chewing on this stick, and I can hear them chewing. Their teeth are they're yellow, and it's because they have a lot of iron in it because of all the wood and all of the plants that they eat. They have to chew. If they don't chew, their teeth continue to grow, and if their teeth continue to grow and they can't eat, then they'll die of starvation. So that's why they munch on everything in sight. And this is quite a large dam out at Quabbin. And I mean, they get rocks, they put rocks in. I mean, look at the size of the things that are in this dam. And this dam has been blown out 2 or 3 times in the last 10 or 15 years. There's just so much water behind it. And the next day, they're right back.
How do they carry rocks?
They
They're
two
forepaws?
Yeah, in their paws. Yeah, yeah. And they've got the strongest teeth. I've seen them pull stuff I've seen them pull 4 or 5 inch logs and drag them down out of the woods into the water and swim across and cram them in their land, in their lodge. Now, this will give you, if you've never seen a beaver work, I know it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can go through here. Oh my goodness. Right.
They know right where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
And when they decide they've got it where they want it, they leave and they go get another one. And it goes on and on and on and on. I've had more fun with these animals, so I'm thinking about doing a book. You know, I want to see that again. Their tail, they use their tail to signal danger, and all the other beavers, they hear them splashing. It means, to me, it means, hey, you're danger, get away. And to the other beavers, it means, you know, mind what you're doing. I saw a bear one day come down to the end of the pond, and the beavers just appeared out of nowhere. I don't know if they smelled it or what, but they just, that bear was just walking down the shore of the pond up in the woods. And the beavers followed that bear all along parallel down the side of the pond and just kept slapping their tail. And the bear was just totally ignoring them. But they also use the fat if they don't have enough food cached up for the winter and it's getting, you know, the end of February into March and they haven't had a chance to get out. Their body will start living off the fat that they have stored up in their tail. Beavers, I should mention, beavers also have flaps of skin in their nostrils and in their ears. And they have like contact lenses that drop down over their eyes, so when they dive, everything closes up and their goggles pop on them so they can see right where they're going, you know. And this beaver, I was watching this great blue heron one day and I saw this beaver coming on the left, and the beaver went by and he went by the heron, and the heron was just minding his own business, waiting for a fish, and the beaver got just out of view of the screen over there, and he turned around and he came back and he got right behind the heron and he let go with a big splash, and I could almost feel it was coming, so I had him ready, and I thought, if he's going to do this, this is going to be a good one. And this past summer, when we had that hot weather, I was worried about these beavers because I hadn't seen them. I hadn't seen them in 2 weeks, and I didn't know if they had moved out. So I went down. I thought maybe they're coming out at dusk when it's cool. So I went down at dusk. I didn't see a thing, no beaver or anything. And then way over in the corner, I heard a couple of splashes. So I was happy that the beavers were still there. And I put my lens over, and I thought there was an owl sitting on this dead tree that was coming down out into the pond. And when I got it focused in, it was this bobcat. And the bobcat was walking up and down on the tree. And the beavers were in the water. And they were just splashing and splashing, and finally the bobcat left. And I got an email one day from this woman who was an information and education director of the Ljubljana Zoo in Serbia. So if you're ever in Serbia, go to the Ljubljana Zoo, and they were putting up a display of the beavers over there. And they were going to get some beavers, and she had found my webpage with my beavers pages, and she wanted to know what it would take to get 8 of my pictures over there to put up on their display. So they got 3 of these boards up there, and I've got 8 pictures. I just sent her the pictures and said, you know, I'm honored to have them over there. So if you're ever over there, and otters and beavers, they don't get along. I've never seen them physically react to each other, but they do stuff like this. This otter was screaming like a banshee, and the beaver just kind of, typical beavers, you know, they never really get excited. And here they come. I love otters. I never know when I'm going to see otters. I was along the shore of Quabbin one day, and I'd seen this family 3 or 4 times. There's an adult with 3 young ones, and I was kind of backed up in the woods, and I see him coming down the shore. I was in a very narrow cove, so there was a shoreline across from me, and I just couldn't believe my luck. They were coming, and they just were not paying any attention to me, and they were just falling all over each other. And this guy discovered my camera, and he put on a good smile for me. But their teeth, they have tremendous teeth, and I would never want to get my fingers in there. They're fish eaters, frogs, and I've had them come up close enough with me where they've been eating fish, and I can hear the crunching of the bones in the fish with their teeth. But they're funny. The kits are born in early spring, and sometimes I see 1, sometimes I see 2. The most I've ever seen is 5. But like I said, I never know when they're going to pop up. They just pop up, and I have fun watching them. I enjoy them while they're there, and away they go. In the early spring, the first birds back are the red-winged blackbirds. And that's a male. People don't usually see the females, but I think the females are as pretty as the males. And they're another one of these species that uses the beaver ponds. Here's great blue herons in the spring. I was taking these pictures in April, and this male, they have a ritual. The male brings the sticks in, the female stays with the nest. And she takes the stick from the male and she puts the stick in the nest. And they've got these top knots that are about 12 inches long, this feather, and the feathers, somehow they stand them right up straight. And this male was ripping off sticks from the beaver lodge that was down 100 yards down. I could see it from where I was. And he would fly up, and he would give her this stick, and he'd turn around and he'd go right back down, and he'd yank and yank and yank. Here again, I can't get enough of these birds. I love these birds. If you can read sign language, she's saying, "Enough already. I got enough sticks." He just kept. And he said, "Well, hey, I've almost got the beaver lodge completely wiped out."
It's hanging in the tree.
Yeah. Now we'll try this one. These guys have patience, and I've seen them wait 10, 15, 20 minutes for a fish. And when they lock on, I've seen them go right completely underwater. The only thing that sticks up is their little tail. And when they stand up, they shake water off them, and their little tail goes back and forth, and the water goes flying all over the place. They are really goofy birds. And this is a green heron. It's a cousin of the great blue heron. It's quite a bit smaller. And this guy, you can't really see it, but he's got a huge tadpole in his beak right there. And there's a juvenile green heron. They used to be called greenback herons, and they were called little green herons. And finally, the birding people just settled on green herons. And this one was right out of the nest, and he was sitting up on the top of this branch here, taking in the world. And I like just taking pictures. If things are slow, in there for beavers, and the beavers are gone for the day, because they usually go in by 7:30, 7:45, they're gone for the day. And then I'll kind of look around, and this is a Phoebe, and there's a lot of flycatchers. If you're a bird watcher, there's a lot of flycatchers. This is a Phoebe. There's a lot of Phoebes that nest. We have Phoebes nested at our house under the eaves in a shed that we have, and every year they're there. And this is a kingbird. These are flycatchers, and you can see why they call them flycatchers. He's got this huge dragonfly. But this one didn't really get the word, because it's trying to fool its chicks into thinking this blueberry is a fly. And this is a great crested flycatcher. And these birds nest, and they spend time way up in the top of the trees. You hardly ever see them. You hear them up there, but you never see them. And I was in a pond, and I was up 25 feet on the edge of a pond. And these pair, 2 years in a row now, this particular pair has been nesting in there. And one day, this guy popped up and landed right in front of me. And you can see why they call them great crested flycatchers. One thing I should mention before I forget about blue herons, if you've ever tried to sneak up on a blue heron, it's pretty hard to do, because they have what they call monocular vision. One eye, their eyes are on the side of their head, and one eye can look this way and the other eye can look that way. So they can see what's coming on either side of them. And there's a song sparrow family that keep popping up. And in the spring, warblers they'll come by. This is a yellow-rumped warbler. And obviously this is a yellow warbler. Bees, I got into taking pictures of bumblebees this year. And this is pretty amazing. Bumblebees, their wings beat at 200 times a second. And I had a shutter speed of 5,000ths of a second before I finally could stop wings in air. Massachusetts, they had 11 bumblebees, and in the last 100 years, 3 have disappeared. There's 7 left now, and 3 of the 7 are in danger of disappearing in the next decade if environmental trends aren't straightened out. And they're also what they call a keystone species. And these are just a couple of bumblebee pictures. And this is a blue dasher. That's what it is. It's the most common dragonfly in North America. And can you tell that I got a little brand new micro lens this past summer that I spent hours and hours just going around chasing bugs like this. This is a cabbage white butterfly. I got a feeling I'm going to have more pictures. A lot of monarch butterflies this year, which I was glad to see. Whoops. But yeah, and we've got milk. We had a real nice patch of milkweed on the side of our house. And 3 or 4 years ago, a woodchuck appeared, and she decides to come live with us every summer. And my wife can't have flower gardens, no vegetables, no nothing, because that woodchuck is just everywhere. And the thing is, we never see it. I mean, we might see it once or twice a week, and then when we see it, it's going like lightning across the lawn. Deer use the ponds. Beavers keep the water. This one particular pond, my favorite pond, these deers come out in the morning.
Where is this?
This is up in Petersham, town of Petersham, north end of Quabbin.
Yeah.
There's 3 or 4 beaver ponds that I spend way too much time in.
Pretty isolated up there. It's
Yeah, it is. This is a little buck. See, he's got little horns just starting. That's a little bigger buck. And this is along the shore of Quabbin. Patience. This particular spot, I've gone in there, I've spent 4 or 5 hours and not seen anything. And then I've come away with deer pictures and coyote pictures, and it's a nice 10-pointer last fall. And one thing about the deer at Quabbin, they can't read. I don't know what it is, but and I was walking up the power lines one day in Peter Sam, and I saw a bird in the top of this bush, and I stopped and I looked at it, and it disappeared. So I stood there for a few minutes, and I kept watching with binoculars, and it wasn't a bird, it was the ears of this moose. And he came out to see what it was. And I don't know who was more surprised, him or I. But here again, moose, you never know when you're going to see moose. I heard this moose before I saw it. It was slurping. And I was probably 100 yards down the road from the pond, and it was a quiet morning, and I could hear it slurping. So I crept up, and I got set where I could get a good camera angle, and it came up to see who was watching it. It's a nice, beautiful female moose. And then this is bull moose from Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. And that's our home away from home, up there. I was just up there, and I got another tremendous picture of a bull moose. If you ever get a chance, go up to Cape Breton Island. And then one day I was in a cemetery, and I noticed chipmunks going back and forth on the wall. So I spent 2.5 hours and took 280 pictures, and I decided I'd see if I could catch any in the air flying. So I took, out of all the pictures I took, I had 25 pictures of them in the air, and out of the 25 pictures of them in the air, only 5 were clear. They either had, the tail was blurred, the eyes were blurred, the feet were blurred, but I got 5 pictures that came out pretty crisp. And I'll tell you, that was a workout trying to catch. And you know how fast chipmunks go. But I couldn't follow them. So what I did was I just set up the camera and I just waited for them to come through my transom. You know. Yeah, great to watch. And this is where all your sunflower seeds go. And this is where all of Mrs. Hillman's apples go. This is an apple orchard up the street from us, and I was taking bear pictures up there last fall. I really like this time of year because from now until March, the coyotes are going to be active, and I never know when I'm going to see them in the Quabbin. This was in a snowstorm, and I saw these 6 coyotes just trooping across the ice and the snow. And this is an old friend of mine. I've seen this guy 5 years in a row now. I don't know how old he is, but he knows me and I know him. And last spring I saw him creeping along, and here he is, and he spotted me, and he decided it was time to sit down and have a talk with me. So we talked a little bit, and then he said, well, I gotta go. And he said, hey, while you got your camera there, get my good side. And then off he went. That was last year. This was 2 weeks ago. I heard this great blue heron making a heck of a racket. And this was almost exactly where I took those last pictures. And I heard this racket from this heron, and I looked and looked, and he had been coming up the shore of the Quabbin, and he'd been coming right at me, and I hadn't seen him yet. And he stopped, and he just turned around, and he didn't know what to make of the heron, but finally the heron gave up. So the coyote came this way, "Oh, you again, Dale?" he says. I mean, he pegged me. He looked right at me, and then off he went.
Oh my God.
Turkeys were shot into extinction, and in the 60s, the Mass Division of Fish and Wildlife decided they'd reinstate the turkeys. So they got some turkeys from down south, and they let some go in the Berkshires, and they let some go in New Salem. And they weren't hardy enough to make it through the winter. So then Mass Wildlife went and they got some from upstate New York. And they let them go. And then they got some more and they let them go in eastern Massachusetts. And now they're everywhere. So that was a good program that worked out well. Loons, I love loons. They do loon surveys at Quabbin, weekly loon surveys, and when I retired, the biologist came to me and she said, "You can't retire because you still have to help us every week with the loon surveys." So because they're threatened birds in Massachusetts, the DCR along with Mass Wildlife, they keep good record on these loons. And my Quabbin book has got a section about loons in there. And here's a young one with chicks. These chicks are only a week and a half old. They're just gorgeous birds.
Red eyes.
A lot of fun to watch. And this is this section. I've got a section in the book here about this. It goes into detail. This was the plan that they did in 1982 to 1988 to reinstate the bald eagles at Quabbin. And they were almost extinct because of all of the DDT. But the DDT was affecting the nest, the eggs, the calcium in the birds. The adults would lay eggs that weren't thick. So the weight of the eagle, the female eagle, would crush the eggs. So the numbers were crashing. And in 1972, they finally came to their senses and realized that it was the DDT that was causing it. And they stopped the DDT, and the eagle numbers started coming back. But the bald eagles had been seen at Quabbin off and on since 1951. And because it's so clean and this good feed for eagles, in 1978, they decided they'd see if they could reinstate the bald eagles back to Massachusetts. And they did it by hacking. And it's an English term that means raising a bird of prey by hand and returning it to the wild. And an eagle will imprint on an area that they grow up in. So that's what they were going to do. They were going to bring the eagles to Quabbin when they were young, and they were going to keep them in a cage at Quabbin for 6 to 7 weeks until they could fly. Then they were going to let them go at Quabbin, and it was hoped that they would imprint on the Quabbin and they would nest at Quabbin. And that's exactly what happened. In 1982, they tried it with 2 eagles, and I worked on this program. I was at school in UMass. And the first 2 birds they got came from Michigan. They were Betsy, they named them Betsy and Ross. And they released 41 eagles in the 6 or 7 years that they did this. And this is what they raised them in. They'd go up into, most of them came from Nova Scotia. They'd bring a chick down here and they'd leave a chick in the nest up in Nova Scotia. So the eagle that was left, the chick was going to survive because it wasn't going to have any sibling rivalry. And the bird that was going to come down here was going to survive because it was going to be taken care of by us. And then they put another level on this the following years. And here's birds. This bird on the left came to Quabbin and the bird on the right stayed. They're examined by a vet. When they released them, when they could fly, they put radio transmitters on them. They put leg bands on them, and they had wing bands on them so they could see them. And then they let them go. And at the end of 7 years, they ended up with 3 chicks in 1988. 2 out of one nest and 1 out of the other. And then they stopped doing this program in Quabbin. This is an eagle nest. They make tremendous nests. There was a nest that came down in Florida, and the biologist took it all and put it in a truck, and they took it to a way station, and there was 2 tons of sticks in that nest. And this is the first nest in Massachusetts since 1906. And my friend Billy Byrne took this picture. He climbed up the tree and he took the picture of these chicks when they were banding them. And what they'll do is they'll hatch and they'll hang around until they're probably 15, 16 weeks old. They fly, and eventually throughout the summer they'll disappear, and we can see them sitting around. This is a young one. It takes a bald eagle 5 years for the head and tail to turn white. And then they're sexually mature, and then they're ready to start breeding. And any day I see a bald eagle is a good day. Black bears, I had a chance to take a lot of pictures of black bears. There's an orchard up the street from us, and these bears one night I had 5 bears in front of me. Fish and Wildlife estimates 4,500 bears in Massachusetts. We have them in our yard in New Salem, and we have them up the road. And once it used to be a real rarity to see a bear, but now it's common to see bears. And I was amazed at this. They can smell chicken on a barbecue from 5 miles away. And they remember where they found a snack 5 or 6 years after. They have great memories on where they get their food. And this guy was eating this apple, and I set the camera up, and he was looking at me, and he wasn't doing much, and he was kind of looking at me, and I was wondering, maybe I should, back off. And I was probably 80 yards away when I took this picture, and then I cropped it a little bit to bring up the detail. But no, he says, I'm taking my apple and I'm going home. And off he went. He lumbered down into the woods. This is great. I found this in a book. There's a book about bears, and it tells the calories that the bears get from people food as opposed to what they get down at the nature's food. So I mean, if you had to work to get 60 to 80 acorns, wouldn't you rather find a picnic basket on a table?
Or how about the beehives?
Yeah. How about the chickens minus the feathers? Anyways, these are some of the orchard bears. I love this. Look at that look in that bear's face.
So I'm getting that apple right where I need it.
I want that. And,
Right, the right height.
there's a cub right there. She had 2 cubs with her, and here's one of them. She had 2. And then at 10 o'clock in the morning, I had been out. I hadn't taken any pictures, and I was really itching to take a picture. So I thought, it was pouring rain. I thought, I'm gonna walk into the orchard. And I never saw bears in the orchard after 8:30 in the morning. So I took it, I went, and I walked in, and here's this bear looking at me. And this happened to me a couple weeks ago, and it still brings the hair up on my neck. I'll tell you the story. I was in the beaver pond, and I was taking pictures, and there was a wall that was 40 feet away from me, and it went down, and it went down into the pond. And the beavers had gone in, and I was waiting to take pictures of stuff, and there was nothing. So I'm thinking I'm gonna go home. So all of a sudden I heard this crack, this big, tremendous crack, and a snap, and I looked to the left of me, and this bear had hopped up on a wall, and it was from me to Liz on the wall. And it was looking at me, and my heart was right up here, and the top of my head was going to explode from adrenaline. So it just, I mean, on the computer, you can almost see me in the eye, the reflection of the eye. So I reached up and I turned the camera a little bit. And luckily enough, I didn't have to raise it up or down. So I reached around, and I always use a tripod, and I always use a cable release when it's dark. So I just reached around and I looked into the camera, and I took 2 pictures, and it went click, click, off it went, turned around, jumped off the wall, went down to the edge of the pond, and where it went. Yep. The last couple things I want to mention is balloons. I hate balloons. You should hate balloons. If you have relatives that have balloons at parties, weddings, talk them out of it, because the balloons are the worst things. The Mylar balloons are even worse. They make it out to the ocean. They make it to the ponds. I took this picture one day of this juvenile bald eagle with its feet all tied up in a ribbon. I don't know what happened to this eagle. I'm hoping it was able to pick it off. And then the other thing is monofilament line. If you bird watch, if you hike anywhere where people are fishing, I always check to make sure there aren't any of these rat nests. People get tangles and they get mad and they rip it up and they throw it on the ground. And this is what happens. This is a female merganser. I couldn't get close to this bird, but I know this bird died because she was all wrapped up. And Quabbin, they've got these things up that you can find that stuff. And my friend Paula Packard does this. And every year she collects all this stuff, and she has this big box for the monofilament line, and she's got a deal with one of these outfits that make fishing line, and they'll take it and they recycle it, So the only thing that I can tell you is, if you're a wildlife photographer, don't answer the phone or don't go on Facebook when you've got something in front of you, because this is what happens. I didn't want you people to think that I was perfect. So I had to put a picture in here. And then, this is all I can tell you.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening.